A few months ago, I set out on a journey to upgrade my workspace, both in function and in appearance. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but I was embarking on what would become the single largest 3D printing project I've ever done, filled with frustrations,
oh no, I'm too late.
Hurdles, learnings, and delay after delay after delay. But in the end, it came out absolutely incredible.
Dude, that's looking awesome. Oh, nice.
And I just can't wait to show you guys. So in this video, I'm going to share with you everything I learned, everything you need to know if you want to upgrade your workspace in a similar way, and whether or not I do it again. Let's get after it. As you probably know by now, if you're not a first-time viewer, I have long been a huge fan of 3D printed organizers, particularly Gridfinity and the Honeycomb Storage Wall, or HSW. I've got HSW in my home office, in my main set here, along the walls of the workshop, and even in my print farm. It's literally everywhere. And for that reason, I had long been resisting the beckoning call of Multiboard, the multifunctional, ultra-compatible 3D printed alternative by my friend Jonathan over at Keep Making. Every time he tried to explain its benefits, I'd make excuses or politely decline. Eventually, I told him, look, I'm just too deep, man. But along about, say, 6 months ago, a series of things all fell into place serendipitously, and suddenly I was open to actually giving it a try. First and foremost, I finally cracked the process of recycling old 3D prints into new filament, making it possible for me to literally shred up old unused prints or Honeycomb Storage Wall and turn those into actual usable multi-board panels rather than using 100% new and virgin material, which I honestly and rightfully felt really guilty about. Second, after almost a year of feeling uninspired and uncomfortable here in my studio, I actually called upon my interior design friend Coral, who does some of the coolest and trendiest businesses here in Israel, if you need an interior designer, and she agreed to come help me with redesigning my workspace to make it more inviting, more calming on the eyes, and overall just less chaotic. Now, I actually expected her to tell me that all the honeycombs everywhere on the wall were just too busy and too cluttered, and that they'd ultimately have to go. But instead, she really surprised me. She actually encouraged me to keep going with it, that instead of having it only on the walls, I should actually also cover all of the faces of all of my shelves in either multiboard or honeycomb wall. This, she said, would not only give a more uniform look, but it would also hide a lot of the clutter. Now, this was a brilliant idea, the kind of idea that Coral is honestly known for, and I took it as an opportunity. See, I already had a ton of Honeycomb Storage Wall, but I'd been warming to the idea of trying out multiboard. So now, instead of completely replacing or shredding down and recycling all that old honeycomb wall, I could reuse entire panels of it on the shelves for aesthetic purposes only, and then put multiboard up on the wall. And I say aesthetic purposes because the third impetus for my project was that I wanted to get all of my power tools and heavier things off of the desk and toolboxes and onto my wall. And I saw my buddy Alan of Mandic Really create a really slick looking tool wall, and honestly, I wanted one of my own. But as any of you who've actually used the Honeycomb Storage Wall can attest, while it is more aesthetically pleasing, at least in my opinion, than multiboard, and while,
you know, hexagons are the bestagons.
The HSW system is really not very good at holding a lot of weight. And I've actually had my drill at home fall off the wall more than once when the panels flex under its weight. Now, multiboard is a little bit different because instead of relying only on snap fit or push fit connectors, it has a multitude, hence the name, of connection options. It can get honestly a little confusing, but basically you have snaps, which can be normal or weight-bearing. You have pegboard hooks in the smaller holes, and you have threads, small, medium, and large. And that's because every single hole on the multiboard or on the connectors is also threaded. And all the boards are double-sided. And you can remove the board from the wall without unscrewing it if you need to. And they're like strong, like really, really strong, like hold up 75 kilos per panel strong.
Oh, and hey,
editing Jonathan here, I forgot maybe my favorite part of all, which is I was really against the octagons because,
You know, hexagons.
but by doing the octagons, you avoid the whole hassle and confusion of hexagons and how they have a directionality and how things can't work in every direction, and then you have to plan the tiles based on the staggering of hexagons, so it really saves a whole lot of complexity. Now there's a lot more to it, but honestly, I don't want to overwhelm you with all of the possibilities right now. So suffice it to say that multiboard is a lot more versatile and a lot more functional if you want to actually hold real weight. But the fourth and final reason why all this came together was that Jonathan of Keep Making generously offered to step in and actually sponsor this video, not so he could influence what I have to say or anything like that. He hasn't, but rather so that I could afford to turn down other sponsored video opportunities and instead devote my time and energy to doing all the work that it would take to plan, print, and build my dream multi-board setup. And let me tell you, it was a lot of work, like way more work than I could have possibly imagined. I started the project out by planning alongside Coral exactly what we would do. At first, we considered all kinds of crazy ideas, including moving my office into the print farm and moving all the printers out here, so we'd have more space for printers. But eventually, we settled on something less drastic and more practical for my workflow. We would expand the work surfaces here in the main room to extend all the way around the studio, adding a number of shelves along the back wall. Then we would cover the faces of all the shelves, including the ones that I'm standing behind right now, with either Honeycomb Storage Wall for the areas where I don't plan to hang anything, or Multiboard for the areas I do, in order to hide away all of the clutter and create a more uniform look. I would even cover the back of some of the shelves so that I could organize my tools while live streaming, which would really help keep my workspace organized and tidy and cut down on the amount of time I spend looking for tools on the table. Then, with the Honeycomb Storage Wall that I was currently using on the wall repurposed to the faces of the shelves, I could feel free to design my dream multi-board setup, complete with a beautiful wood panel facade running behind it on one wall and some beautifully painted walls on the other. All in all, we were looking at printing something like 15 square meters of either multi-board or Honeycomb Storage Wall. Not to mention all of the connectors, the mounting hooks, the interfaces, and much, much more. It was time to get to work. As I typically do with these types of projects, for better or worse, I just started printing, and I plan to piece everything together later. I always prefer to kind of batch print this type of thing and have as much of the printed parts available at my disposal as possible when I'm ready to assemble it, even if it means later making sense of everything I printed out or going back and reprinting some things. And as I also typically do with these types of projects, I made use of a lot of different printers, including but not limited to the Prusa XL and the Creality K2+. Now, I was lucky enough to get to try out a lot of the tools that are only now becoming available to the rest of the multi-board community, including a fancy interactive website that allows you to generate your own multi-board tiles in whatever size you want and however many stacked as high as you possibly could want. You can actually even ask it to give you multi-material versions so that you can use PETG as an interface layer, but I actually had much better results with just the standard single material stacked ones and the 0.2 millimeter gaps that it leaves in between the panels by default. I also opted to use another new release that is only now becoming available to the general public, which is these flat-edged tiles which clip together on the edges. This means that you lose some of the pegboard holes in the connections, but that you need far fewer of these kinds of dual or quad double-sided snaps to actually hold the tiles together, which was great for me for most places because I much prefer to have at least the panels that are going to be used for aesthetics on the shelf faces to be as clean as possible. But by far, the MVP, or most valuable printer of this project, was the Ideaformer IR3V2 belt printer. Although the website version of Multiboard's generator only allows you to generate tiles up to, I think, 20 units long, Jonathan gave me access to a special Blender plugin that lets you literally go wild. So while the IR3V2 is limited on the X-axis to just 250 millimeters, I would regularly, as I was planning this project, print out panels as long as 40 or even 50 units long. In other words, 1.2 to 1.5 meters long, and just leave the printer running for days at a time. Heck, sometimes I even went so far as to print multiple of those tiles back to back to back, though a couple of times I wasn't in here quick enough to remove the finished ones and came back to find them kind of bent up against the wall.
Oh no, I'm too late.
No, you definitely don't need a belt printer to print out multiboard. You can print small tiles or big ones, and admittedly, you probably lose some strength printing in the 45-degree orientation. But man, let me tell you, for a project of this scale, it was really, really useful to have one. Even though the slicer did have some issues with the custom-generated Honeycomb Storage Wall panels that I downloaded from Gridfinity Perplexing Labs website, so I did end up printing most of the actual Honeycomb Storage Wall on the Prusa XL or the Creality K2. It's hard to overstate just how much printing this project was between the panels, all the mounting pieces, and of course, the fixtures to actually hang things up on the wall. Yes, there are adapters to reuse your existing Honeycomb Storage Wall pieces, but I wanted to get rid of the blue-green Makita color that I had before, so I ended up printing pretty much all new everything. It was actually so much printing that I repeatedly ran out of white filament from my sponsor, Polymaker. I then got additional shipments. I ran out of those additional shipments again, and eventually I got desperate and resorted to recycling my own filament, which was a desperation that led to a major breakthrough that I detailed in a recent video. So I'm proud to say that while I probably consumed as much as 10, maybe even 15 kilograms of filament throughout this project, thank you Polymaker, at least 2 to 3 kilos of it was 100% recycled. Now I'd love to say that assembly and installation all happened in one smooth process and went off without a hitch in a couple of days, but in reality, it took a couple of months between waiting for more filament getting stuck in customs for a month, extruding my own filament, and just finding the time to actually get this project done. Whereas the black panels for the fronts of the shelves over here used the flat edges and the dual clips to actually mount together, the white panels for the wall use flat edges, but then use the standard keyed interfaces between the panels. Because I figured that anyways, I am going to need these quad double-sided connectors to actually mount the panels to the wall, there's no sense in giving up the pegboard holes to reduce these. Now, one really cool thing about multiboard as opposed to HSW is that even when a hole is used for mounting a panel to the wall, you can still use that hole with a snap or a thread. Or, as I later learned, if you actually want something to sit flush over it, you can even use these little flush part Bs that go into this, which will actually hold the panel to the double-sided connector without sticking out. In any case, I went about assembling all the different black panels using these new dual clips, as you can see here. Now at first, I tried doing it with my bare fingers, but I really don't recommend doing that because number one, it hurts like hell, and number two, as with most different multi-board parts, there is a dedicated tool designed to make it much easier. I also don't recommend that you insert a dual clip into every single one of these holes because it will be really, really hard to snap the larger panels together. I actually tried with open jaw pliers, I tried with my bare hands, and nothing worked, so I eventually had to use a rubber mallet to force them together. But fortunately, it really is a whole lot easier if you just stagger them on every other hole, and the panels are still very rigid and sturdy even with the half connectors. Eventually though, I had everything printed out and it was finally time to tear down the old, wait over a month because the decor company shipped the wrong panels, and then put up the new. Can I just say that I cannot believe that I did each one of the wooden strips individually on my other set, because these extruded plastic panels make it so freaking easy to cover an entire wall of faux wood paneling in like an hour or so. Now it was time to actually get things up, starting with the shelf panels themselves. On the end caps, I used the normal double-sided mounting brackets. I'll talk about in a second since those panels won't come off very often. In a future video, I'm going to turn this into a charging wall for all my electronics, so do make sure that you're subscribed if you want to see that. But for the removable panels on both sides of the studio, I plan to use my own custom-designed magnet holders with 15mm magnets to hold the large panels onto the shelves, both multiboard on this side of the studio and HSW on the other. Early on, we had made a major assumption, Corel and I. We knew that covering my shelves was going to be a sacrifice to convenience, and that every time I wanted to access the shelves, I would need to remove the panels. But we figured that A, I only access the shelves a few times a day, which pales in comparison to the number of times I look around the room and get annoyed at the clutter. And B, we figured that by adding magnets, it would be really easy to remove the panels and then just slap them back on when I was done with them. Unfortunately, some parts of that assumption were erroneous. The magnet-only solution, even with copious amounts of 15mm magnets, which, by the way, are not cheap, yeah, it just didn't work. The panels kept sliding down or falling off completely even after I applied Plasti-Dip to the magnets. Frustrated, I started putting M4 screws into the holes on the shelves to hang the panels up. And that held them up, but after a week or two, I had to face the obvious. This was super inconvenient. The panels are a real pain in the butt to take off and hold there each time while I'm accessing the shelf. They're flimsy and they fall off every time one of my kids touches the panel, and it's almost impossible to hold one of these big panels with one hand while I try and put things back into the cabinet or shelf. It was so bad and so inconvenient that I routinely found myself just putting things right onto the countertops instead of dealing with removing the panels. And it was at that point that I had to face the music, and I really started to question, what had I done here? Had I just burned through kilos and kilos of filament and weeks of my time on a silly, fundamentally flawed idea, putting aesthetics over functionality in a workshop and thereby making my workspace unusable in the process? I actually considered abandoning the idea altogether, taking all the multiboard and HSW panels off of the shelves and stacking them up in the corner of a studio to use them somewhere else in a future project. But then I had another idea. You see, one of the beauties of multiboard is that it can become three-dimensional, especially with the new update with the clips on the side. Like, you can build it out and you can connect things to the edges of it. So why not hinges? Like, why not hinge the panels at the bottom and use magnets on the top and make them effectively hands-free? I could even use or design some 3D printed struts on the side to keep them straight and prevent them from falling all the way down. And that honestly got me really excited and energized, because this was an opportunity to have my cake and eat it too. So we'll be doing that in a future video, but in the meantime, I was free to move on to the two large multi-board setups on the actual walls. Now, multiboard is unique in that you can assemble the panels on the floor or on the wall because they're held together on the wall with these double-sided snaps. So you could ostensibly mount the mounting pieces on the wall if you get your holes right and just snap the panels on later. But it is better to assemble large swaths of the board on the floor and then mount it on the wall. Now, another reason the double-sided snap idea is really cool is that if you, say, want to access the back of your installation to screw something in or to run wires behind it after the fact, you can actually remove the entire thing from the wall without having to undo all the screws. You just need this special little tool to remove the front parts of the snaps. So with the panels on the wall, it was now time to finally populate them. And that meant, honestly, learning a lot about multiboard and the various options and systems that you have for mounting things to the wall. Honestly, I feel like I could spend an entire 25-minute video just talking about all the different things I learned and all the different systems and subsystems within multiboard. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of parts. There are numerous different interoperable systems such as the multi-point, the multi-bin, and the multi-board that are all designed to work together seamlessly. And if I'm honest, it's generally just really overwhelming. Or at least it was when I started getting into it 6 months ago. Fortunately, since then, Jonathan and his team have been really hard at work developing all kinds of resources for people just getting into and learning multiboard. And these include the interactive website that I mentioned before that makes it easy to find all the different parts for all the various systems, as well as a number of guides which explain what type of part is best for what type of application. Now, you might be different in this regard, but personally, I'm the kind of person who likes to have fewer options. Like, I like that my iPhone doesn't let me customize absolutely everything about it, because I can find that really, really overwhelming when things do. Multiboard is not like that. It's one of those things that lets you customize absolutely everything, and there are probably 5 different ways to do each thing. But I've been pressuring Jonathan to also create a set of rules or best practices for people like me, to explain, for example, that if you want to use a snap, then you should only put X kilos on it. Whereas if you use a weight-bearing snap, you can put Y kilos. Or like, why would you want to use a thread as opposed to a snap? Or why might you want to use the pegboard holes instead of the large snaps or the large threads? And so on. For my part, though, I found it best to just dive in and start experimenting and printing things out, or to see what readily available models and remixes were out there for the things that I wanted to hang on my wall, and then observe which of the many different connection methods they had used. While Multiboard isn't on a full Creative Commons license, nor do I personally think it should be, given how long Jonathan and his entire team have been actually working on all of this, they do make 100% of the designs free and remixable, and they even provide step files and STLs for you to remix easily. They also have a ton of resources out there and pre-planned packs available to members, so a membership is probably worth it, at least when you're first starting out and learning the intricacies of the system. Personally, I just dove in and started printing a few of everything. Including way more Honeycomb to Multiboard adapters than I would ever possibly need to use, because I quickly realized that it really is better to take advantage of Multiboard's unique and native strengths. For example, I would download something like this Makita battery holder that I have here, which used just 2 snaps in the back, only to realize that it would fall off every time you swipe the battery in place. But this isn't Honeycomb Storage Wall, which can be really confusing with the spacing and staggering of the different holes. And we don't have to settle for just push-fit connectors. So instead, I downloaded this remix, which makes use of a large thread in the top hole to firmly affix the battery to the wall. After a while, I really started to get the hang of it and vibe with the overall philosophy of Multiboard. I even remixed some of my old favorite models, like these Makita tool holders, which are made to go on a wall, but adapted them to work with Multiboard. Again, kind of the beauty of Multiboard is its versatility, even if that's overwhelming at times. Like, yeah, you can design custom parts to work with, say, the large threads or spaced properly in the mid-sized push fits, but if you want, you can just go into your slicer or CAD software and put some chamfered holes into any design, and then use those holes to screw whatever the heck you want onto a multiboard. And it'll be strong, like way stronger than just adding snaps or pressure fit stuff in there. I mean, spoiler alert, but like, look at what I'm able to hold on my wall with just some small threads. Over the course of a couple weeks, I gradually moved all of my tools out of the bins, tabletops, and tool chests where they were collecting dust and back onto the wall. A lot of times I would go back and adjust things, and I really came to appreciate and enjoy the fact that Multiboard is designed to make it really easy to remove and relocate things without damaging the panel itself. It's designed to last no matter how many times you screw and unscrew things onto it. But now, how about I just shut up and show you guys how the whole thing turned out. But alas, no organization project is ever truly done, and so now let's talk about what's next. In a coming video, as I mentioned before, I want to turn the edges of my shelves where I do all my video recording into a fully functional charging wall. I'd also like to do some cable management both on that wall and under my desk, both at the office and at home. And rumor has it that Jonathan and his team are hard at work designing a bunch of new parts that are going to facilitate not only those projects, but many, many more. In fact, I also know of some really exciting updates coming to Multiboard to take it to the next dimension, pun intended. And I'll also be upgrading the ones on my wall back there even further once those new parts become available. Finally, as I said, I'm definitely not happy with the usability of the Multiboard shelf faces or the Honeycomb Storage Wall faces, and so I am looking forward to experimenting with different types of hinges or struts to make it easier to actually operate them day to day. I know it might seem really silly and short-sighted that I created a functionality problem for myself by solving an aesthetic problem. But first of all, I think that the trade-off of always having the studio feel organized and pleasant versus occasionally being inconvenienced a few times a day when I need to get something off of my shelves, that's probably a worthy trade. But what's more, as you've probably figured out by now, I think that Multiboard is a versatile and flexible enough system that with a little bit of work and maybe harassing Jonathan over at Multiboard, I really will be able to have my cake and eat it too. And eventually I will end up with a beautiful workspace packed with functionality with zero compromises. And I'll make sure to share some YouTube shorts or something like that as I improve and update my setup. So do make sure that you're subscribed if you'd like to hear about that. I also give special behind the scenes content and updates that are a little less polished, but a lot more fun to my YouTube members and Patreon supporters. In any case, that's all for this week, but I'll see all of you on the next layer.